All right, in this episode, we talk about injury and different throwing programs.
And should I play another sport?
All right, Brent Porcio, Jonathan Heisinger, or better known as Zinger here. We're at the Baseball Dojo in Los Alamitos. This is Mark Brooks's place. We were here for a little camp, and we're here to do the @TopVelocity hashtag Pitch and Tips show. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, Musically, @TopVelocity hashtag Pitch and Tips, hashtag Baseball Tips. You know, ask your question. We're going to answer on the show. It's cool. We got Zinger here to answer a couple of questions. We're not going to do a typical analysis right now because we're off-site, but wanted to plug a little bit of Mark's place down here. If you haven't checked out Mark's stuff, TopVelocity.net, go check that out. If you're in the area, also he's got his new facility here, Baseball Dojo, really cool place. We've enjoyed it. And then Zinger comes along to help out, and Zinger's got all his new stuff going on. So tell him what you're doing.
Having some fun. AZ Fuel Baseball Development, working on creating better athletes from the ground up. Also have the Coach Zinger app for your phone. So some pretty cool stuff coming with that.
Cool. And where can they find you?
You guys can find me at John Huizinga, JONHUIZINGA, pitchingcoach.com.
Cool. And we're going to be over at the ABCA here in Anaheim at the Anaheim Convention. So we're pretty excited. If you're out there, we're going to be in booth 854.
Yeah, buddy.
We'll be there hanging out, having a good time, enjoying ourselves, talking shop. Come out, we have some giveaways, and we're looking forward to it. So let's get started. We got a first question for today. Patrick Manger asks, for you, speed is better off the mound versus weighted ball versus long toss, and which one might cause injury in an age-by-age basis? All right, Patrick, this is a pretty loaded question. It really goes down, to me, sounds like the essence of approach. I feel like you might be applying that I use a weighted ball, long toss, mound progression of a throwing program, which I do not. And I'll tell you why I do not. It does link to injury. So I think that's important that you bring that up, because I feel like guys in those approaches working with young pitchers, youth pitchers up to professional pitchers, do fall into injury problems because it's a big part of this game. Mainly because if we look at ASMI, there's 3 reasons for injury: poor mechanics, poor physical fitness, overuse. And weighted balls, long toss doesn't solve any of those problems, unfortunately. It just typically adds to the overuse, doesn't solve the poor physical fitness, and doesn't help with mechanics, specifically as studies show. So trying to take someone who can throw 95 in a running throw with a weighted ball or 300 feet in extreme long toss and get that to translate to the mound doesn't just happen like that. It's a process that, to me, doesn't even come from the weighted ball running throw or the long toss. It comes from teaching them how to use the kinetic chain, specifically how to use the lower half to develop power in a static movement, from a static movement in a one stride at an elite level. So typically my guys who we don't do that, we work in drills and then work those drills to the mound. And we have very good lower halves. We're very explosive through our training, through our Olympic training, that when my guys do a 2-step throw and hit 95, they can get on the mound and hit 95 or 92 or whatever. There's really not much of a difference because they understand. Sometimes they even throw harder because they're better at using the lower half in a quick movement as opposed to running and trying to organize it and use that movement. Mm-hmm. So when I see it not translate, that's because those coaches and those approaches aren't addressing the key issue for pitchers, is how to implement the lower half. How do I create that momentum, that energy that I'm getting when I run, or that I'm getting when I do a crow hop to throw 300 feet? How do I recreate that in a static position on the mound, which is obviously not teaching you in those throws? That's why it's not correlating. So, and if you look at age and you look at injury, and if I take a 13, 14-year-old who obviously more than likely, like most of them, doesn't have the leg and core strength, doesn't have the shoulder strength, and I put him in a running throw with a 7-ounce or 6-ounce baseball, that the ASMI study shows just with a 2-step crow hop is the same peak torques as a 5-ounce ball on a mound, not showing us what the overall work or forces and loads on the arm or over time, which are typically longer because of the weight, then I know there's a chance if he's not separating and using the kinetic chain because of the poor hips and trunk, that I'm going to set him up for injury. And that's why we're seeing a lot of injury coming out of these approaches that use these running throws with weighted balls and long toss. We've got to take those young kids, build the legs, build the core, teach them the kinetic chain, how to use the movements, and develop all that before we start dumping intent and telling them to throw hard. We got to build that first to prevent injury. If not, we're going to have tons and tons of injury, which we're having in these approaches. So that was everything in a nutshell for me. So why don't you give it based on how you coach?
Very similar approach here, especially for the younger guys. If you're asking about a 14-year-old, really big on building that fundamental base of athleticism, then going into the med balls, then going into a lot of the close net throws or the drills, if you will, and then going to the mound, which to me is ultimately the most important part, right?
Yeah.
If you can throw 95 in a running throw and you're 88 off the mound, who cares that you throw 95 with a running throw? To me, it rarely transfers. I've seen a lot of guys go through a lot of different approaches. This approach, and it's why I came and studied under Brent and watch his stuff as much as I can, but because when we're pitching, we are standing still. Even if we're in a windup, we're still standing still. We don't get to run. We don't get to crow hop. So how can we create the same hip shoulder separation, the same torques, all the good stuff, without first learning the lower body and from the ground up? So for me, if the question is geared towards what's the most important, it's definitely off the mound. So
yeah, I mean, of course, I implement a couple of step throws, a little crow hop into my throws to kind of get them out of analysis paralysis. But do you really find value in full speed running or running with different weighted balls or trying to throw the ball as far as you humanly possible can throw? Do you find any value in that in developing a pitcher?
I do not. And we tend to do a lot of video. So we video it. It doesn't look the same. It doesn't look the same as a guy like Chapman, who we love to use as an example. It just doesn't correlate. It doesn't look the same. I videoed myself. I used to take a bucket of balls, throw them from home plate, see if I could throw them over the fence.
We all did.
and then I took video and I was like, whoa, that doesn't look like what I'm working on. Okay, so I had to question that. I've thrown weighted balls. In fact, I've thrown a lot of weighted balls. But once again, I did not see the correlation. I did not see the transfer. I might have thrown 97 with a 2-ounce ball, but then when I went to the mound, I was still the same.
Yeah. Because it's in the studies. It's not just saying it doesn't correlate just for us.
To you or me, to everybody.
If we look at ASMI's study, the most recent one on weighted balls showed that it was beneficial if done on a mound, which was fine. But once you took it off the mound and you just did a 2-step crow hop with it, it became risky to them. So just imagine if you did it with the running throw, it becomes dangerous at that point. And I heard ASMI doesn't even want to do the study with the running throws because they're very concerned they're going to be injuring those in their study. So we're not just saying this just with our experience, we're saying this a lot too based on the science. Same thing with extreme long toss. We see it changes mechanics. It increases torques without increasing velocity. And if we look at the other studies, which I've shown many times before, we have a study that showed based on body weight, torques in the shoulders went down as you advanced from the youth to the professional level. We also have studies that show shoulder velocities don't correlate to the level you're at, meaning from college to pro, shoulder speeds actually goes down as ball speeds go up. Okay, so we've got this big thing, this big understanding in baseball that's about arm speed and arm strength, but the studies don't really show us that. It's how we use the body. It's how we use the kinetic chain. There's so many other parts to the body that need to handle the torques, that need to distribute the energy and generate the forces on the ball. We need to stop trying to think it's all about the arm. I mean, don't you feel the same way?
I think we've heard it for a million years, even from the old school guys. Use your legs, use your legs, use your legs. I never heard anybody say, hey,
use your arm.
Use your arm.
Use your arm.
Hey, you need to use your arm a little more than you know. No, it's all about using the legs. So you have to learn how to do that too. Very few guys fall out of bed just knowing how to do that.
But if you don't go down the road of long toss, if you don't go down the road of running throws and weighted balls, then you actually have to know what you're doing. You actually have to sit down and coach. You have to teach them.
That would be the idea, yes.
You have to fix their hip problems. You have to fix their trunk and core
Their
problems.
instabilities, their mobilities, their strengths, their lack of strengths, their speeds, their powers, all those fun things.
I mean, do you feel like a lot of coaches today just want to sell the gimmicks because they don't want to take the time to coach?
I think a lot of kids want that too, because they want to be able to say, yesterday I learned how to throw 5 miles an hour harder, and it just doesn't work like that. You know, it takes time, whether your nutrition, your workouts, your biomechanics, all the good stuff, it takes time to develop, you know, as you know, and I think it does take a certain attention to detail. I like to think most coaches have the best of intentions, but let's face it, a lot of them do go through the motions and they carry on what somebody told them versus digging into some research and seeing that now there is research available, as you know.
And what I find too is those making gains in weighted balls and extreme long toss, which studies show gains will be made there, I don't find them to be substantial, meaning like I don't find them lasting through a season, because you can't keep that training approach in the season because it's just more throwing that you're going into and your arm can't handle it. Just like us, you know, we make gains in developing the kinetic chain, putting the loads on the body, develop the kinetic chain. Just same thing. If we stopped our training, we go to season, it eventually fades away. We've got to keep that, but it's easier to keep the lifting, the med throws into a season than it is to keep throwing more, you know, throwing the weighted balls and the extreme toss and the running throws, because that just, the overuse goes through the roof. I mean, don't you find that if those guys are making gains in those approaches, it's going to be incredibly hard for them to keep them through a full professional season?
I think that too, and then I think a lot of the, kind of back to what we were talking about, but with the coaches, we need to see more of a conversion of coaches who understand all the aspects. So it's like they understand the lifting. They understand, not, hey, go lift with your strength coach and then come play catch with me. It doesn't work like that. You know, at least for me as a coach, I don't want to coach guys that I'm just working on throwing the baseball, because I'm just going to sit there and bang my head against the wall. The only way we're going to really get results from that ground up and build better athletes.
These coaches have to advance and learn and research and understand the new information that we have, and it's really changing the game, because it should. It's showing how we've done a lot of things backwards, and we've done a lot of things that have been too stressful where it didn't need to be stressful.
And you see other sports where there's guys that are getting less injured and actually training harder. So
exactly. So I think that's all we're promoting. Good question. I think all we're promoting is that's becoming very conventional, this extreme throwing approach and how it correlates from different throws. When we find that to be just kind of, I don't know the way to it doesn't seem to be that effective, obviously.
Well, too much of a good thing
healthy.
Is too much, right? And I think that's forever. I mean, I think you have to push your envelope as a athlete, but that doesn't mean putting yourself in these stressful situations that doctors who are way smarter than us, or smarter than most people, are telling them. ASMI, for example.
Right.
But
That's
if those guys are spitting out information, coaches, we need to be grabbing onto that information, because it's going to be helpful for our guys, which at the end of the day, it's ultimately about helping get our guys better. So in turn, we have to get better in order to get them better.
Exactly. I think that's the theme here. So good. Let's go on. What's our next question? Peter asks, does cross-training or playing another sport help you for baseball? Good question, Peter. I've always been a big advocate of playing multiple sports, specifically something that helps to build athleticism. I think it works well with it. I've always said baseball and football works well. I mean, it's hard to argue that when you think of Bo Jackson, Deion Sanders, Brian Jordan, Tim Tebow. I mean, it seemed to work pretty well for them in a way. So, I mean, so I would say yes, definitely multiple sports. I mean, really, Olympic lifting is another sport. I'm promoting that in an off season, so I'm really promoting another sport in my approach to help build your athleticism, besides letting baseball try to build your athleticism. What do you think?
Absolutely. I was a college coach at one point. As a college coach, we love getting guys who are multiple sport athletes. They tend to be, better athletes. So a lot of my guys, I'll encourage you to get into some martial arts, especially in their younger ages: gymnastics, football, boxing, anything with footwork, anything with athleticism, and absolutely a big fan.
Yeah, I think that's an easy answer to that question. I think baseball is pushing you to play all year round. I think you need to push away the pressure to play that fall season. whatever it may be. That's summer season, late summer season, whatever, and try to get another sport in there, or try to get some development time like we do with Top Velocity, like Zinger does, and do that. I think that's critical, strictly because the overuse is just too much, and when you're just playing, you're just in overuse. You're really not in development.
Exactly. Well, and I get it all the time. We talked about it earlier today, but where guys will come to me after going to a showcase and wonder why these coaches didn't contact them. Well, you're throwing 78 miles an hour. You were better off taking that whatever fundage or your time or whatever and putting it into your player development versus your showcase, because what are you showcasing? Well,
nothing.
Nobody noticed, so it must not have been what they were looking for. Guess what? There's 5 tools in baseball. You got your speed, your hitting contact, hitting power, your running, and your defense, right? For a pitcher, what's the first thing you're going to look at? The radar gun. Now, I'm not saying that's the ultimate end-all, fix-all, whatever, but you're going to have to train in order to get yourself where you need to be. If you just keep playing games instead of the cross-training, instead of the Olympic lifting or yoga or boxing or karate or whatever, you're going to get left behind.
Yeah, I think it makes a great point. And you're just being pressured socially by those in your town or on your team to keep playing on each team, and it's not good for you. I mean, it's crazy. You take guys and young kids, and you convince them to take that off season and do something like this or some other sport, and then they go back and everybody's like, how'd you get better? And it's like, I actually practiced.
I actually worked on my skills, coach.
I developed myself. It's shocking that they don't understand why you got better, but I think that's critical. I think you will literally change your career if you really stick to that pretty hard. And there's a lot of successful big leaguers that have told those stories about how they really worked hard to take their time off and get bigger, stronger, faster. I mean, I think Bryce Harper even talked about how he was a big lifter, he was a big trainer. Him and his dad spent a lot of time practicing, training, and of course playing. But there was a lot of off season in what got him to where he was, in baseball. So I think that's, unfortunately, it's weird. You're saying that's the secret right now to your success, is actually taking an off season. When I was growing up, that's all we had were off seasons, because we didn't have travel ball and all this.
I had snow where I grew up. It's like, I'm going to go pack up a bunch of snowballs and throw them. That's about my baseball.
Yeah. So finding that time, I think, is critical, and it's crazy. It's hard to find today. You got to find that time, especially if this is what you love to do and you want to be really good at it.
Invest in yourself, guys. It's worth it.
Yep. Invest in your product, which is yourself.
Mm-hmm.
All right, cool. If you have a question, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, musically at TopVelocity, #pitch tips. See at ABCA. This is artofbaseball.net. Mark Brooks's Baseball Dojo. Jonathan Zinger. Give them where they can find you again.
CoachZinger@gmail.com or John Huizinga pitchingcoach.com.
All right, guys. We'll see you on the next episode.